You always believe in God?
I think, yeah, I probably always believed in God, but I was not a very, I didn't understand what it really meant to have a personal relationship with God.
Hmm. And when was the turning point?
Uh, Turning point was 2019 when I was sick. That was, it brought it home to me. I, I was sure after that. I was at home in Toronto
Hmm.
with my husband and my son and his wife. My son was living in a house on the same street that we were living on. He was newly married. And Jordan and I had begun touring with his book, 12 Rules for Life. It was the first popular book, 12 Rules for Life. Um, I wasn't yet speaking on stage or anything. I was doing logistics for him, making sure
Hmm.
he had enough to eat and caught the plane and the hotel rooms were good and that kind of thing. Uh, but I was always when I was traveling with him, there was always a question in my mind, what am I doing here? So I was always asking, what am I doing here? I know I'm doing this, but what am I doing here? And that fall in October, no, it wasn't. It was in the spring. In May, I went on a walking tour in Croatia with my sister. I asked her, I had arthritis in my knees and my hands. I had a hard time going up and down stairs or putting the barrettes in my hair. My hands didn't work, my knees didn't work very well. And I asked if we could go on a tour for 70-year-old women. But one of her friends had survived cancer and she wanted to go on a very challenging. So when I got there, some days it was nice and flat. We would walk from Croatian uh, castle on one hill,
Hmm.
25 miles to a Croatian castle on the next hill. And we had a man who would drive our baggage from one to the other. And there were four of us, and we just walked. It was beautiful. It was in May. It was gorgeous, and I love to walk. And uh, it was just perfect. Actually, it was perfect. I was starting to only eat meat at that time, but I couldn't really find much meat there, so I had to eat I had to eat uh, dried meat, which doesn't have a lot of fat in it anymore. Anyway, it was a difficult trip, but I had a very good time. But on the way back on the plane, I think I caught something because 2 weeks later I had a very high fever and terrible digestion. And then the fever broke, but the digestion never got better. And so eventually, after about a month, I went to the doctor, and he checked me for parasites. He couldn't find any, and he did an ultrasound and he found a shadow on my kidney. And so they did a biopsy. I think I had to fly home from Ireland because we went back on tour. Flew flew home from Ireland and went to the doctor. They took a biopsy. They told me, oh, renal cell carcinoma. It grows this much a year. It will never kill you. Don't worry. So we went back on tour. We went to Australia, came back to Southern California, and I knew there that I was going into surgery when I got home. So I can remember that day spending with Jordan thinking this is my last day with my husband when I will be healthy and not under the knife of a surgeon. And so I went home and I had surgery right away. And they took out half my kidney. And I was walking after that to get strong, and I walked every day. I probably was walking at least 10 miles a day. I was walking. I was walking from my neighborhood down to the CN Tower and back, so quite a long ways. But by the time I had been walking for about 6 weeks, I started to get a pain in my back. And when I went back to the surgeon, he looked at the biopsy from the surgery and told me that he had misdiagnosed my cancer, that actually it was something much more rare that they don't diagnose when people are alive. It kills them so fast that they only diagnose it after death. But now they were diagnosing it to me, and they told me that I had less than a year to live. So I was pretty shocked. I thought that I had got better. I didn't think there was any problem, but now I know there was a problem. So I think both my husband and I were in shock. But I thought, my mother died of dementia when she was 75. My aunt died of cancer, lung cancer, when she was 60, just over 60. My uncle died of cancer, lung cancer again, from asbestos poisoning, because they used to use asbestos, and he was in construction, and she did the laundry, and they both breathed it in. So they both died of lung cancer, he before he was 60. So I thought, well, I'm in my 50s. Maybe I have cancer too, and maybe I have the same destiny as my relatives. So that's how I kind of came to terms with this shocking news. But then we drove home, and I stopped to see my son. And he came out. We must have called him out of the house, because I'm sure we were outside. And I looked at him, and I told him that I was going to die, that we had bad news, that I only had a year to live. And of course, he wasn't expecting that, because I'd already had surgery. He was expecting I was going to bring him good news. But so he was surprised by it, and I saw a terrible grief in his eyes. A grief you'd only have for someone that you felt very deeply for, Anyway, it was the same kind of feeling that I had for my baby. When a baby is born, a mother feels an amazing love for that baby, and I felt that same love shone back to me. And then I felt more worthy to, I just felt more worthy. I felt more necessary. And I felt a weight come off my shoulders, which I'm still not really sure what it is, but I definitely felt a weight come off my shoulders. I felt like there had been wings holding me down, and now they let me go. And I said to him, actually, no, this weight came off my shoulder, and I felt peace fill my body. And I said to my son, only God knows when I'm going to die. The doctors don't know. And we will go forward with gratitude, because I realized that I wanted to stay alive to serve him. And so that's how that began. There's much more to that story, but at that moment, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that God was there and was giving me a chance to see life in a new way. And I was willing to accept that. I mean, it just seemed obvious that I should accept that and not question it. I questioned exactly what happened, but it wasn't like I was questioning if it happened. It happened, And they put me back in the hospital as fast as they could, and they took out the rest of my kidney and all the lymph on this side. So a radical surgery. It had gone into my lymph glands, this cancer, but only just barely. So they took it out. The night before we went into surgery, my husband and I were watching TV, and I could tell we weren't really in the room. We were way too nervous. And I said, I think we should go upstairs and do a meditation that I learned when I was 26, when I was studying massage therapy in university. I studied a psychology class where I could choose whatever I wanted to study, and I wanted to study massage therapy. And I found a therapist who just taught me how to, in 10 lessons, how to give a relaxing massage. But at that time, I was also given a diagnosis of cancer on my ovary. And so I was very nervous one day, and he taught me a meditation where I laid down, and he told me to breathe white light into my body, down to my ovary. And I did that. And I could imagine like a string of very, very white light, and I spun it around, and I asked what the problem was and not to be afraid of me, to share with me if there was any problem. And over about a 2-hour period of breathing in and out and inquiring, I felt something leave on this side of my body. And I had had an ultrasound, and they told me that this ovary had a solid mass about as big as a grapefruit or a softball. And when they did surgery, it was only as big as a golf ball. It was small, and it was a cyst that has teeth and hair and skin in it. And people can have these kind of cysts. They're called dermoid cysts. They can be anywhere in your body, and it's a twin that didn't materialize. But it grew because I had become pregnant, and which is another story. And when they found this cyst, so I went to the doctor. I had that surgery. It wasn't cancer. It was just because it was a solid mass. They thought it was, but they had told me it was cancer before even doing a biopsy, which is not a good practice. That's not a good practice. So that was the first mistake, was that time. But then now this time I had also been told that I had nothing to worry about. And now I had a deadly cancer now. So now I had 2 doctors trying to tell me what they knew, but making mistakes. But now with my son and telling him, I realized that it really didn't matter, that God had me anyway. He had me in his hands, and I had nothing to fear, that he would take care of me, and we would be grateful for whatever came our way, because, well, there was nothing to fear. I had nothing to fear anymore. So I went into this hospital, and I had the surgery, and it was fine. Went fine. They got the cancer out, but they left a leak in the lymph. I mean, the lymph is like a spider web in your body. It wraps around your blood vessels and your organs, and when you eat, it takes the fat out of the food, and it metabolizes it, and it gets rid of the waste, and it metabolizes what's good in the fat. And so they left a hole, and my bodily fluids were filling my feet. So within about 10 days after surgery, my legs started to swell. And we called the hospital and said my legs started to swell. And they said, well, it was a very radical surgery, and I should suspect some swelling. But it was extreme swelling. It swelled so much that by the time I got to the hospital, it looked like I was very pregnant, because I couldn't get in a car. So I had to walk to the hospital. I couldn't sit down. I was very, very, very uncomfortable, but I was walking by shops with windows, and I'd look at myself and I'd think, oh yeah, you look like you're like 7 months pregnant, like pretty pregnant. But I got to the hospital, and they put like they would for water, they put a spigot in my side, and they took out 9 liters of fluid, more fluid than they had ever taken out of anybody. But it was a milky white color, because that's all the fat that the lymph takes out of the system. So it was like milk, looked like milk. 9 liters. It was a lot. And then they put a bag that would be emptied every day after that. So they sent me home, and they told me not to eat any food with any fat in it. So I made soup out of tomato juice and chicken and maybe I put a few other vegetables in it. I don't know, but I hadn't eaten anything from meat for quite a while, so it was kind of a, it was all right. It was kind of a, it was like a holiday from meat because I was eating all of this other soup. But I was I was in a, I was in an apartment with my husband because we had begun to renovate our house and I got really sick. So we were living in different Airbnbs. So we were in an apartment and I was having a nurse come every day. She would empty a liter of fluid off this bag, which would make me reasonably comfortable. I was still pretty uncomfortable, but it was, you know, with painkillers, I could tolerate it. And we were waiting for the doctors to figure out what to do with me. And so I don't know how long I stayed in that apartment. I know that July 1st came, so it was I had surgery in May, I think early May. So I was in that apartment for probably about a month, eating no fat and trying to give the lymph system a rest so that this hole would close up. That's what they told me would happen. But it didn't work. It didn't work. It never closed. I never got any better. And because I was losing so much fluid, my electrolytes went out of balance. And you need your electrolytes for your heart to work. You know, when your heart pumps, it's an exchange of calcium and potassium to make the heart do what it's supposed to do. And they are electrolytes. They're not. It's calcium with a plus sign, right? It's got an electron, which makes it an electrolyte instead of a mineral. And so you have electrolytes in your body that pass nutrients through from your cell and out of your cell. These carry fat and nutrients this way and that way, but because I didn't have enough fluid in my body, they were becoming unbalanced. And when your electrolytes become unbalanced, you have a heart attack and you die. And so I was sitting at home in my apartment with my son and his wife, and I was kind of in a dream state. I couldn't really think very well, and I was thinking things like, if I get up and walk over to the bathroom, I wonder if I'll make it, you know? And so, but I was taking that on as a challenge instead of recognizing that this was a problem. I wasn't very clear thinking, you know? And they were taking my blood pressure and they couldn't get my blood pressure. So they went and they bought another blood pressure cuff and they took my blood pressure and couldn't get my blood pressure. And they were just young. They didn't know. They weren't medical type people. And I was just so not with it that I couldn't even help them negotiate the thoughts that needed to happen with that happening. Luckily, in the morning, I had a doctor's appointment and they took me to the doctor. And when he saw me, he put me in the hospital and he put me in the ICU. Before I went to the ICU, I went home and got a toothbrush because I thought, I'm not going home. Like, whatever's wrong with me, I'm not going home.
Mhm.
And so when I went into the hospital, they put me in a room in ICU overnight on a heart monitor. And they tried to take blood out of this arm, and there wasn't any blood coming out of there because I didn't have any blood pressure, so they couldn't get any blood out of me. Oh my goodness, they milked this arm to get blood out of it. It doesn't work anymore to give blood. I always have to give blood here because that one is destroyed. They must have eventually got blood anyway. I don't remember. And I slept that night, and eventually they put me up in not very long, like in the next day, I think it was, they put me up into a step down room from ICU, which is a room where there are critically ill people and there's a nurse between every two people, so they can monitor very closely. And so I woke up with enough fluids back in my body to realize that I was in the hospital and that I was in a very dire situation. I could see people who were burned over there, and there were people, they were all very, very sick, and I realized I was also very, very sick. And then they moved me into a private room and left me there, really. They didn't know what to do with me. They couldn't find this leak in my body, but I still was losing all the fluid out of my body into this bag and into my legs. And so they gave me a nice room with a view, and I laid in bed, and they convinced me in a couple of days to put nutrition straight into my heart, which was good. Once they did that, then I could think. In about 3 days, I could think clearly. And then I got an email, and I read an email from a Catholic friend. She had just come to our house once to ask Jordan for help when they were trying to stop this gender craziness from getting into the schools, and they were asking him for help if he would speak up for them. And so I guess she heard that I was in the hospital. I remember, I think that she used to leave, I think she left a can of maple syrup on our step once. Like, she was just a very kind person. I didn't know her at all, but she emailed me and asked if she could come to the hospital. Queenie Yu is her name. She worked as a university counselor in a Catholic dorm that was associated with U of T. And it really was a girls' dorm, and it mostly had international students in it. And so she was associated with the university. She must have been keeping an eye on Jordan. I don't know. But anyway, she found out I was in the hospital, and she came. And she had a rosary, and she gave me one. And she gave me a photograph of Mother Mary and baby Jesus, an Asian one, because she was Asian. So she gave me that and put it on my desk. And I said, "Oh, a rosary." I said, I don't know how to pray the rosary. And she was surprised that I asked, but she decided that she would answer to my call, and she started to teach me the rosary. And so she stayed, I think, the first day for 2 hours. And I would talk about my family, the ones who have passed, the ones that were alive, and how much I was going to miss them. It was very good. It was a good process of coming to terms of where I was in my life. And so she would come every day. I stayed in that hospital for 5 weeks. She came every day and gave me 2 hours of her time, which was very good, because I would pray the rosary. We'd pray the rosary. She'd tell me to have an intention for each mystery. So we would think, well, who do we want to pray for? Oh, I'd pray for all the people in the hospital. Who else do you want to pray for? Oh, I want to pray for all the babies that are born and unborn in the world, and pray for all the sick and dying, pray for all the politicians in the world. Pray, so I prayed globally. I prayed locally. I prayed for my father, who was very old, and my sister. But if I prayed for my father, I prayed for all fathers. And if I prayed for my sister, I prayed for all sisters. And prayed for my son, I prayed for all. Did he have a little baby by then? No, he didn't. I prayed for all sons and all daughters, and so it was good for me. I don't know, it gave me peace to think that I was doing something to be helpful, because it seemed to me at that point that if you're not being helpful, then you're not living in God's will. So I had to find meaning in the prayers, and I did. I would go back to my room. It was a hard time. I'd go back to my room. My husband would be laying in my hospital bed, and he was sick. He was so sick. He needed to be in the hospital bed. But I was in the hospital bed, so he got, 2 hours of sleep every day. And then he would wait with me all day. He wouldn't go away. And my son and his wife would come, and mostly we played cards. And that's how we passed the time. But I was in a private room. My sister-in-law collected prayers, and she wrote them on pieces of paper and put them on my wall. That was helpful, because at night when I couldn't sleep, I would look at the prayers and I'd remember that there were people praying for me, and that was helpful. It was very helpful. At night, I would pray the Lord's Prayer. I was only 80 pounds by then. My shoulder blades stuck off my back, and I had no bum, no breasts. All the fat of my body was gone. Oh, it was very cold. So I don't like to be cold anymore. It's quite funny. I'm from a very northern place where it's sometimes 40 below, and I can't really do that anymore. I have to be warm. So I moved to Arizona. It's warm there. even hot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was a brutal time. It was a brutal time, but they kept scanning me to find where this hole was, and I would just pray the Lord's Prayer through all the pain, and I could do that, and it would sustain me, if I constantly prayed and I didn't let my thoughts come in, and at night is the worst time to think, because you think up very terrible thoughts at night. And I would pray the Lord's Prayer at night, and or if I was cold. But as soon as I was cold, I'd wake up and then I'd pray, and I'd pray over and over and over and over until I slept again. And I wouldn't let my mind go anywhere that was questioning what was going to happen, or I just didn't let my mind go there at all. And it was good, because in the morning I'd wake up and I would know I was awake at night, but all I could remember were the prayers. So it wasn't a painful remembrance that I was awake at night, except for that maybe I was cold. There wasn't anything worse than that, because I wasn't letting my mind go there. And that was the same thing with the scans. I didn't let the pain and the fear of the scans come into my mind. I just prayed and persevered through the prayer over and over again. And I could really endure anything they put me through. It didn't matter how painful it was, how long it took, how cold it was. So really, I had a lot of relief from that, and then I could be grateful that my family was there, and I enjoyed my time with them. Even when I was in the hospital, we played cards and sat around and visited, and probably had Skype calls with other family members that weren't there, and I have fond memories of the time I spent with people who came to visit. I had other friends who have prayer practices, came and prayed with me, and they were at the ARC conference, actually, those people from Toronto. And it was a good experience. All in all, I wasn't praying to survive. I was praying for, well, to stop myself from thinking things that weren't helpful, and then to be grateful for the moment that I still had with people. And that was as much bandwidth as I had. And so I did that for 5 weeks in the summer. All summer.
Si te ha gustado este corto, tienes la entrevista completa en pantalla y en nuestro canal. Muchísimas gracias.